started off as a PG podcast, but then Devin just kept on dropping shits and fucks, and now...
That's right. We are live.
The ghost faced himself, Brandon Panev.
This isn't like the start of last season when it was just, it looked like the Canucks were just a beer league team not playing defense at all. And just before Chris goes, no, I'm kidding, Chris, you can actually go now.
no, hold on.
Oh, we have to give more time for coming on late. So.
I still had, hold on. All right. Chris go, and then I got something else to say at the end.
So, an elf and a midget in 2 back-to-back games. Yeah, he's definitely on a friendship tour for sure.
Saying, oh yeah, I'm okay with him being, the 6'7" defenseman. No! He is a AHL defenseman right now.
Look, Shonky, don't mind Devin, okay? We all struggle with Devin, so you know.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Shifts and Pucks podcast. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter at Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com Shifts and Pucks, Twitch.com Shifts and Pucks. Subscribe wherever you get your audio, as well as on the Area 51 Sports Network, as we are live and getting kind of in this calm before the storm. I think we are getting into the Stanley Cup Finals. Probably, I would suggest, one of the most anticipated Stanley Cup Finals in at least 7 years, maybe even longer, with the Tampa Bay Lightning and Colorado Avalanche. We'll get into that. We've got some things to say on a couple of topics that riled our grill this week on the Twitter. And so we got lots to get into. Hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm in Revelstoke this week. How are you doing, Kevin?
I'm good. I am in the land of rain, but there's no rain.
It's here.
It's in Calgary. Apparently. It's it's in Calgary. We haven't had any. I got to tell you, like, for those that were, concerned about the heat wave the last couple of years, I think the universe has spoken, and we're not getting a heat wave this year. It has been just a very mild, fallish like summer. Like, I don't think we've had 2 days over 20 degrees. Like, it's pleasant, but it's not hot. But we're not getting the sun.
I would argue for Vancouver, give it another month or two, because it's not until like August. Late July, August, that Vancouver actually gets hot.
It's been earlier this last couple of years.
Once the heat wave does hit, you can send your complaints to @KEVOLE.
Why? Why send them to me?
Because you just jinxed it. Because you said it's not going to happen.
Oh. You know who has my tweets is apparently Oilers Twitter loves me. I said sarcastically, because I find a way to get them upset. Boy, are they all mad at me again. Anyway, how are you, Sean?
Good. Yeah, like I said, we're stuck in the atmospheric river apparently now here in Calgary. We're expecting some torrential rains for today, tomorrow, and into Wednesday. But once that's done, I'm actually going to be joining you two in BC.
Welcome.
For a few days. Heading out to the Okanagan on Wednesday evening. So
out in my neck of the woods.
Good. Yeah.
Fun times to be had by all. Tyler's out working, I think. Devin is somewhere. I think Devin's on a plane.
Last I heard, he was in San Diego.
Yes, he was in San Diego. Yeah, he did tell me that. Maybe he might do a run-in. Who knows? But we got lots to get into. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, we'll put them in the chat. We've got lots to talk about. We're probably going to have a couple of rants. But first, we just have to start talk about what we're about to see starting on Wednesday. The Tampa Bay Lightning, shirt that's behind me, are taking on the Colorado Avalanche. And Tampa Bay Lightning have made their third straight Stanley Cup final. Down 2-0 in the series against the New York Rangers, down 2-0 in Game 3. They came back and won the entire series. And so the Tampa Bay Lightning are facing the Colorado Avalanche, who have not played since 2020. They've had a couple of years off, so it's going to be rest versus rust. But honestly, just in terms of the Stanley Cup final, I actually think this one has a lot more excitement to it. They're definitely probably the two of the best teams in the league coming in. You've got the two-time Stanley Cup champion, and then you've got this rising stardom with Colorado that I think both teams have some love with them and some hate with them too. I think it's going to be a very good series.
Yeah, as you're a Flames fan, Kevin. Isn't that sacrilegious to have a Lightning shirt there?
But I don't. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm wearing a Seattle Kraken shirt as well. So
pick a damn table, Kevin. Pick a damn table.
I picked one.
He's doing his best impression of the hockey guy from YouTube.
Exactly. I love them all.
Yeah, but this is probably the best. It's probably the most hyped up Stanley Cup final in the last 3 years.
Yeah, Tampa Dallas wasn't hype. Tampa Montreal wasn't hype. Yeah, that was man. This is like Tampa.
And then you had St. Louis, Boston, which was two absolute like big market and strong fan bases in 2019. And then 2018, you had Ovi versus Vegas. That was huge. That was hyped up a lot. So, and then after that, it was the Penguins, Chicago, Tampa in 2015.
Right.
So,
like, I would argue that it's probably the best quality, like best on best Stanley Cup final we've had, and not just like a team that got hot in the playoffs and went on a run, but like the two best teams probably, and yes, I'm fully biased, but the best matchup probably since 2011 as far as best on best. Like, yes, I'll give some applause for that 2019 matchup between St. Louis and Boston, but you could make an argument that St. Louis was only hot in the second half of that season and they weren't necessarily like top tier, but obviously as far as entertainment level, they definitely brought it. So yeah.
I think with Boston and St. Louis, you could make an argument either team could win, and it did go to 7. But I think Chris is right in that St. Louis was hot in the second half of the year. This one, this feels like these are the two standard bearer franchises in hockey right now. And you can make an argument, I think, legitimately that both of these teams, if someone said to me they're picking Colorado, I wouldn't think you're off your rocker. And if you're picking Tampa Bay, I don't think you're off your rocker. It's two really, really, really good teams. This just has more star power than Boston St. Louis. There wasn't really the star. The star power was the hatred towards Brad Marchand and the admiration of drinking of Brett Hall. But other than that, there wasn't really a lot of star power in that Boston St. Louis series. There's star power in this series. There's Kucherov, Stamkos, Vasilevsky, McKinnon, Makar. If Kadri returns, if Point returns, there's just a lot of great players in this series. So in that case, I think that makes it a little bit more watchable.
That is a team that's going to take that championship mantle from Tampa and is like kind of like the heir apparent. It is Colorado.
Yeah,
I have the same vibes that Colorado has now. Tampa had prior to their breaking through that ceiling back in 2020. Like they'd be knocking at the upper echelon and then just couldn't break it. And I feel like this is Colorado's year.
I mean, I think for me, this comes down to who you think the difference maker is. I mean, if I go matchup by matchup, goaltending is obviously Tampa Bay. I would give defense the 6th defense to Colorado. Top 6, I think, is damn close.
I mean, depends on who's healthy, really. There.
Yeah.
Both teams missing very key players in Point and Kadri.
And bottom 6, I probably would give it to Colorado, depending on things. I mean, I think Arturi Lehkonen is probably the best bottom 6 player in this series. Coaching, I would give to Tampa Bay. It's close. I think this series is going 7. I'm having a hard time believing this is not a 7-game series.
Yeah, in most matchups, they're pretty damn close as far as, like, there's no one that's head and shoulders above the rest. The only category that I would give a decided edge is in goaltending. Because Vasi is one of the best, if not one of the, like, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Whereas I don't think either of the Colorado guys are going to be anywhere close to that.
And this is why I think the top 6 and bottom 6 I don't think is fair, and especially with the way Colorado's built. You said Arturi Lehkonen's the best bottom 6 forward in this series, and he's playing on the second line right now.
I would, but yeah, and it's going to be interesting how they match up. Now, they did kind of switch things around for Edmonton a bit. It puts some different people together. They juggle their lines a lot, and it also is going to depend. Again, it's going to depend on whether Kadri is healthy. And for Tampa Bay, it's going to depend on whether Point is healthy, where you put there. Yeah, I don't know. It's the best goal. I mean, there's so many good players. I just think it's going to be good hockey. Like, this is going to be, like, I'm sorry. I know that everyone was just enamored with some of this high scoring stuff with Colorado and Edmonton. I mean, it's fine and it's fun and it's chaotic, but it's also sloppy. I think you can have good hockey that's not sloppy. This is going to be good hockey that is not sloppy. It's going to be well played. I mean, there's probably going to be...
but there's also 90%. What makes it look sloppy is because these teams have skilled players that can capitalize on any small mistake. That's why it feels sloppy at times, is because they have these teams have McKinnon, Makar, Kucherov, Stamkos that can all make you pay if you make one slight mistake, and they have the killer instinct to go in and attack.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I don't know what else. I mean, I think if it gets a bit more chaotic, I think that's to Colorado's advantage. If Tampa Bay can keep it lower scoring, if Vasilevsky can stand on his head a bit more, I think that it's Tampa's advantage. But I honestly think that the series is going 7. And I'm having a tough time. Like you just said, pick a table. I'm having a tough time picking a winner because I think there's legitimate arguments for both of them.
I'm saying Colorado in 6. It's a pure gut feeling, but I think this is Colorado's year, and they're going to find a way.
I'm also in Colorado, but I'm going 7 just because I'm agreeing with you on the winner, but I'm agreeing with Kevin on the fact that, like, it's so close that I think this does go 7.
The one advantage that Tampa's had is they've been here before, and they've been here in the Stanley Cup final before. And I just think that's I think that that playoff experience will help them and I just think the other issue to me is when you have Vasilevsky, it just gives you more confidence. I mean, do you know what was the stat I heard today? I think they've allowed 9 goals since the Toronto series.
They've been on a tear defensively. Yeah,
It's phenomenal. Now,
9 goals in 2 series.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that Colorado has more firepower, I would argue, than the Rangers for sure, and I would argue than Florida for sure. So I don't see that being something that they can necessarily sustain. But I think the fact that they have Vasilevsky and he's so good in elimination games and when they need him, it just gives them an extra sort of confidence. And I also think the other thing, I think I'm leaning towards Tampa here with this, but I think Victor Hedman is going to have an outstanding series. I think Victor Hedman's going to play with a chip on his shoulder because all the talk around Cale Makar, he's going to say, "Excuse me, my name is Victor Hedman. I'm still in this conversation." I just feel like Tampa's the team that's going to come through it, especially in close games. I feel like Tampa's the team that can score that goal and get that save. That's the thing. And has Colorado truly been challenged yet? Did Edmonton truly challenge them?
The closest challenge that they got was in the second round against St. Louis. That being said, my counter argument to that, though, is Tampa's had a pretty tough set of opponents through the first 3 rounds, and are they going to have enough to grind through what is likely going to be a 7-game series, or at least a deep series for the Stanley Cup final? If they still have enough gas left in the tank, then I would give the edge to probably Tampa. But I have a feeling that the rest isn't going to affect Colorado as much and are relatively healthy and not as injured, that I kind of feel like I want to give the edge to Colorado a little bit.
For me, you're onto something there, Chris, because not only is it they've had a tougher road, but this is season 3 of going deep in the playoffs, and the wear and tear may catch up to them.
But goddamn, if they do win, no one can argue that they are a modern day dynasty.
Nope.
You only have to qualify it with modern day. 3 in a row makes you a dynasty.
The word modern day just because it's been so long since we've actually had a legit dynasty. Like, you could maybe argue about Chicago. I probably wouldn't even hear the argument for Pittsburgh, just because I think the Chicago one was a little bit more impressive, even if it wasn't back to back. But we haven't had a team, if Tampa pulls this off this season, we haven't had a team this dominant since the Islanders in the 80s. Or I guess the Oilers were the more recent example.
But the Oilers never won 3 in a row in the Islanders. The Islanders were the last one to win 3 in a row. The Oilers were stopped. They,
but they also won 3 or 4 in a 5-year period.
Yeah, that's damn impressive.
Yeah,
I'm not disqualifying them. I've already got Oiler fans mad at me. I don't need to add that to that sort of nonsense there. But
I'm helping you dig that hole, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna go with my gut. I'm gonna stay with the champs, but I would not be surprised if Colorado wins. I think it's going to be a fun series. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be good June hockey. Yeah.
This is quite literally why we watch playoff hockey. You hope for this as your Stanley Cup final. This is what kids dream about in their driveway: is 2 top-tier teams playing at their best and going at each other's throats.
Yes. Yeah. And I guess we'll talk about how we'll get into the rebuild conversation, because I feel like in Canucks Twitter, some are using these 2 teams as examples of how to get the Canucks successful. That's what we call a tease in this old business. We'll get to that in a moment, but just to touch on the Rangers, a damn impressive performance of Igor Shesterkin. I do think I would not be surprised if he gets a vote for a Conn Smythe. He did have a hell of a playoff. You got to give him credit for that. just, I love that D. I love their 6D. I love that Ryan Lindgren, Adam Fox. Keandre Miller made a huge step this year. And you may not like the way that Jacob Trouba hits, but damn, he's a good defenseman. You've got a very underrated centerman in Mika Zibanejad. Chris Kreider had the quietest 50 goals, I think, in the history of players that have scored 50 goals. I just think, to me, they're gonna be a big player. I think they're going after a big piece. I think they're gonna do all that they can to keep Andrew Kopp. We've heard the name JT Miller. I've got a bold prediction. I would not be surprised if we hear the name Johnny Gaudreau in New York. If there's going to be a team that backs up the brink truck for Johnny Gaudreau, it might be New York, and they might be able to do it. I just, I've already upset Flames fans as well, but I think that's entirely a possibility. It's a possibility. It depends on how you play around with that cap.
It's how you play around with the cap, because if they're gonna, if they, as you said, they want to keep Andrew Kopp, that takes up a lot of their whatever, that they'll take up more cap space than ideally they'll want if they're going to go after Gaudreau. That's why I think going after a JT Miller might be is more advantageous for them if they're willing to give up the acquisition cost, because it's not going to be $10 million for a player like that, at least for one season.
Yeah.
And then after that, they'll have a little more cap flexibility. Although if you look at that, then like this year they've got Kako needs a new deal, Julien Gauthier needs a new deal. They're RFAs. They'll probably be moving Georgiev, so that won't matter. And then you've got Andrew Kopp, who they'd be really smart to sign. What are they going to do with Ryan Strome?
Yeah, that's another question.
Frank Vetrano seems to be a good fit there. Like that he'll take up Tyler Mott. He'll take up cap space if they want to bring him back. Just the one thing I always want to say, just because you didn't win doesn't mean you have to go out and shoot your load and like go after a big name just because you can. They already have Artemi Panarin at 11.6 and change on the cap, let alone Zibanejad's 8.5 deal, and Adam Fox at 9.5. They're already starting to, and let alone Jacob Trouba at 8. They're already pretty top heavy in terms of where their salary cap is at. I don't see it. I don't see them going after a big name unless they're able to move out.
It would have to be a big name for a big name.
Yeah.
It would have to be more this term. It would have to be more of a hockey trade.
Well, yeah, I could see them trading futures for JT Miller for sure, but he's not $10 million on the cap. What I'm saying is I don't see them making a big splash in the UFA market.
The only thing I would say is it's New York, and I think there is an expectation to always go in after the big fish. That's James Dolan, the owner there. He wants to make waves. You wonder what's going to happen with Ryan Reeves. I think that's going to be an interesting decision what they do, and as well.
1.75 doesn't change too much on it.
Yeah, no, I know. In terms of, I don't think it does anything in terms of salary cap, but he didn't play a heck of a lot, and he's 35 years old.
Yeah, but then you also throw in the fact that after next season, Keandre Miller needs a new deal. Lafreniere will need a new deal. Philip Hedl will need a new deal. So whether or not Hedl's there is another question. But Lafreniere and Keandre Miller, that's going to take up a lot. So I look at that and I'm not sure. I'm not sure it makes sense for them to be going all in on a big name long-term contract in UFA. Maybe in the trade market, yes, I think they're going to be a big player in the trade market. They've got lots of draft capital and prospects that they can use to maybe acquire, say, a JT Miller. But I think that makes more it makes more sense for them to build a longer term a team that's going to be together longer term and building, as opposed to just going out and spending too much money on a player who on a UFA who's going to be in their late 20s.
It'll be interesting. I don't know. I just have that hunch that I just wouldn't be surprised if the Rangers are in on Gaudreau. I think they're going to go.
I don't see it. Like I said, I can see why you think that. I don't see the rationale other than Dolan wanting to make a splash, but you can do that in a trade that's more strategic for the future, the present and future of the team.
And isn't Gaudreau's home in Jersey? Wouldn't he want to be on the other side of the river?
The only thing I would say though is Philly is a mess. Jersey, they are so forward heavy. Like that is an organization that needs to upgrade their defense. Like, it doesn't make sense to me why Jersey would be going after Gaudreau. To me, they're forward heavy, and they're probably getting a forward in this draft if they stay at number 2, unless they go off the board and take a defenseman because it's a need. That's the only thing that I would say about that. I don't see Jersey and the Gaudreau. I don't see Philly that working out.
I can totally, yeah. I totally see Philly just being a little crazy about it and going after him. They talked about how they kind of want a quick fix, so that's where I see them. It's at least making sense to them.
Especially the fact that they're owned by a corporation. They don't have patience for rebuilds. They want to make it happen like tomorrow.
Yep.
Philly will have to move contracts out to make it work, but I think it makes more sense to them than it makes sense for the Rangers to do it. If I'm making sense.
Fair enough. We can disagree. It's okay.
We do it all the time.
That's totally fine. I guess the other question is around the team. Of course, Capo Krakow was scratched in their last game, which irked some people. Gallant didn't want to talk about it, but he said during the media availability today, he expects Capo Krakow to be in the top 6 next year. I think that this is shocking on Twitter. You overreact. But this was another overreaction. I think you got to go with we'll get into this here in a bit, but you go with the players that you think you have the best chance to win when you need to win. He didn't feel it was Capo Krakow at the time. He's 21 years old. He's still got a lot of developing to do. Yes, he's the 2nd overall pick. He's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. I don't see the Rangers giving up on this guy. I don't see him requesting a trade. It was a scratch. I know it's a big playoff game, but I honestly think it's a learning experience, and I don't expect him to be traded. I don't think that's happening.
Was he also told to watch the minute, Chad?
What's that?
Oh, no one got the joke. Isn't that why? Wasn't Lafreniere also scratched earlier in the series, and he was told to watch how Zibanejad played? So I was just making a joke that the other young kid was told to watch Zibanejad.
Was it earlier in the whole playoffs? Maybe.
Yeah, I don't
I don't think he was scratched in this past series.
Okay, maybe I'm misplacing my memory. I don't know. I'll have to look into that.
That's fair.
Yeah, the player to watch, the name to watch would be it's going to be Vitaly Kravtsov. They just signed him to a 1-year deal. He needs waivers to go to clear. He needs to clear waivers to go down to the AHL. He doesn't want to go to the AHL. So I think that's going to be someone that'll probably end up trading for a piece. But the fact that he doesn't want to go to the AHL is maybe this is my the Triamkin PTSD. But if you don't want to go and put the effort in, I don't want you on my team.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I just look at that with any player. Like, if you don't feel that you deserve to develop, that you deserve to be in the pros right away, you're not a fit on the team. Yeah.
If you have the confidence to say I will make the team, you won't have to, like, that's one thing. But to flat out refuse to go to the AHL, no, that's a huge red flag for me.
Yeah. And
I understand that he's got other options in Europe and Russia, but to me, I don't care. You need to fall in line with how we want to develop you, and if you don't, then yes, it's up to the team to find a better spot for that player.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll see what happens with the Rangers. It said it'll be an interesting offseason. It always is in New York for sure. But speaking of players and development and all of that sort of stuff, the Calgary FlamesNation.ca wrote an article this week as a potential 5 players of a potential trade targets, and one of them happened to be, there was a couple on the, that I thought was interesting. Jacob, somewhere interesting, but the one that got the most conversation out of everybody was the name Jesse Puljujarvi as a Calgary Flame trade target. And just we'll blend this into the Canucks here in a little bit. But Puljujarvi, of course, the Oilers have some decisions to make. They have to decide what to do with Puljujarvi, and Ken Holland said, I quote, "I need to sort out Jesse." They also have to deal with Kyler Yamamoto, who is also an RFA. You have I think Evander Kane made his decision for them when he said, "Thank you, Edmonton. We'll talk to you later. You were great, but I'm going to try to get a long-term contract elsewhere." But the Flames Nation suggested that the Calgary Flames should go after Jesse Puljujarvi. Now, I'm just going to give my perspective because I took some heat from Twitter, and again, Oilers Twitter and even Flames Twitter shows some love to me this week. Because I was surprised to see him on the Flames trade list as one of the 5. First of all, I mean, let's look at Puljujarvi from the whole year from the Oilers' perspective. He got 14 goals. There was a debate in Oiler land about the use of Jesse Puljujarvi because, some felt that he needed to play with McDavid and Draisaitl, and he did about 80% of the time, according to line combinations. And some felt in the analytics community that Jesse Puljujarvi was driving play in Edmonton. He was driving play for McDavid. He was driving play on whatever line that he was on. And there were others in Edmonton that completely disagreed. He scored 6 goals in 52 games. He scored 14 all year, but in the last 52 games, he scored 6 goals. And for those that believe that it's not about expected goals, but the actual goals that go into the net on the ice, when you're playing with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and you're getting 6 goals in 52 games, that is a bit of a concern. So there's a division on whether Jesse Puljujarvi was as effective as he could be in Edmonton. And I'm not so. What I've been saying here, was he more effective than a Zach Kassian or a Josh Archibald? I would argue that's a yes, but is that a bar that you want to set your standard to? No, it isn't. I'll go on a rant. One day I'll go on a rant on my thoughts of the play of Zach Kassian. This won't be today. But to me, I guess the way that I looked at Jesse Puljujarvi and it comes down to me here. This is my one stat. This is the stat that I have to go on. And this is game 4, Colorado. They're down 3-0. Remember, I just talked about this with Capo Caco. You play the players that you think you're going to win with. Jesse Puljujarvi played 11 minutes and 51 seconds. He did not get a single point in that entire playoff, in that entire series. And he didn't play with McDavid. He didn't play with Draisaitl. He didn't play. So when Jay Woodcroft, the head coach, who everyone does agree is a pretty darn good coach, a pretty reasonably intelligent human being, and an all-around nice guy, isn't putting Jesse Puljujarvi. I mean, this is game 1. He played 7 minutes and 33 seconds. If he's not putting him in situations where he thinks that he could win with Jesse Puljujarvi, I'm having a hell of a lot of trouble finding him a fit in both Calgary and Vancouver, just to blend both of these teams in here. I guess I look at Jesse Puljujarvi as, I see a lot of red flags. I see talent, I see size, but I just feel like there's things that he is just missing, and I just don't see the trust. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm offside here.
I mean, he's still young. That's the big thing, is he's still young, and he can still improve. And I think that's the crux of the argument for a lot of people, is that the underlying stats say that he should produce more. And those underlying stats aren't the be all and end all, like a lot of people try and make him out to be. And some of the details that are holding him back, that Kevin is alluding to here, are things that he needs to work on to be able to take that next step. Like, we're talking about a guy who, as you said, he played a significant amount with McDavid and Draisaitl, and he didn't crack 20 goals.
You know who I see a lot of similarities between him and this player? Jake Virtanen. Larger, like power forward-esque, high draft pick, high expectations, and isn't living up to necessarily where he was drafted.
And I think the thing is I think patience will if there's a team out there that wants to be patient with him, whether it's the Oilers or someone else, I think they will be rewarded with that in a couple years. But I think it's I understand the frustration and why there are two camps lobbing grenades at each other over Jesse Puljujarvi. The Puljujarvi wars, they're legit, and I see both sides. I think it makes more sense to be patient with Jesse Puljujarvi as opposed to cutting bait and run right now off of him, unless they get blown away with an offer where they're getting, say, they're getting a young defenseman who could play top 4 minutes for them within the same sort of time frame. There's no reason to move him in my eyes.
What's his contract status? Is he up at the
end
of the
RFA.
season?
He's an RFA, yeah.
And I think it's 1.6 to qualify him. So But I
And
guess from the
what
trade,
about the Oilers? Are they in a cap crunch? Like, can they afford him, especially with all the other stuff that they have to sign this offseason? That's what I'm curious about.
They're waiting to hear from Duncan Keith and Mike Smith and what their decisions are going to do. And they, according to Friedman, they've got till July 1st to make that decision, or the Oilers have asked that. You've got the Evander Kane situation where I don't think Evander Kane. I think Evander Kane is looking for something long term, and I don't think the Oilers are willing to do it. That's the read I'm getting. So I don't think Kane is coming back. I think quite likely you're buying out Zach Kassian. I think to me, I think Yamamoto is the no-brainer. You also got Ryan McLeod. That's a decision to make there. I think you can afford to qualify him, but you also have a lot of other things that you need to fix. So I don't think you give him a raise. I think that if you want to be patient with him, I think you give him a 1 year and see what we got. And that's where I kind of come in from a trade perspective is I don't feel at this point that this is a guy that I want to give up a heck of a lot to. Like, I'm not giving up a heck of a lot for him. If maybe he pops. You're right. Maybe this is a Nichushkin. Maybe this is a Backlund. Or maybe this is someone else or another player that pops. But maybe, as Chris says, this is a Jake Virtanen. I just don't know. And so I don't know if I want to take a huge risk and give up what I think the Oilers would be asking for a Jesse Pujärvi. That's my point, really, ultimately. I just don't see a trade fit there. I don't see, if they want a fourth to a seventh round pick, I mean, I'm sure that's a good. I'm open to that. But if anything more than that, I don't see that making sense.
No, and just for clarity, according to Cap Friendly, the qualifying offer for Pujärvi is 1.41.
Oh, sorry, it was in the 1 points. I remembered that. I was going with
Yamamoto's is 1.175. So there's not much difference between that, and I think they're all this talk about Pujärvi. Same thing can be said about Yamamoto, a player who was drafted in the first round. There was high hopes for when he first came in, and he hasn't taken that next step.
Yeah. I think they do need more from Yamamoto. And you've got, in Edmonton, you've got Xavier Bourgeau that's going to be knocking on the door. He's going to be playing in the Memorial Cup, so more eyes are going to be watching him. So even that, in that case, I don't know how much you're giving Yamamoto in terms of a raise right now. You probably are just qualifying him.
He got 20 goals. So he's going to...
okay, fair.
So he's taken more of a step than Pujärvi, but I think you're fine. I have no issues with that. I think he'll make over 2.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't know if you're giving
the big thing for the Oilers is what happens with Keith, because if he retires,
it's a huge bonus for the Oilers cap hit, because frees up instead of getting a penalty, they get a bonus essentially for being the team that has him as he retires.
Yeah.
And I think what I heard was it would free up $9 million on the Oilers cap.
Yeah, because it would clear out his 5.5 and change, and then there's a 4 point something credit, which I've read some stuff on Twitter where I don't think they'll get that full 9 something. I think they'll just get the 5.5, but that's still going to open up cap space for them if he does retire.
Because, the only thing that I would have a question about is if they got some sort of bonus, then I'd be like, does that mean that Florida technically got that same bonus when Luongo retired?
No, it's
because that's where I'm kind of get confused about the whole retiring early on those backloaded contract type situations. But that's probably a discussion for later on in the off season.
Yeah.
Requires too much research to actually talk about it with any sort of level of education about it today.
Yeah, because finally the Canucks are going to be rid of the Luongo cap recapture.
And only to pay Halak and Holtby instead.
Holtby and
But I think, what I gotta look this. I'm just looking this up here, but I believe there's also something with if Mike Smith retires that affects the cap as well.
No.
I think it doesn't dry just the regular cap hit.
It would, but his cap hit would stay. That's the thing with Mike Smith. He signed a 35+ contract, multi-year contract, and if he decides to retire, his 2.2 cap hit will stay.
Okay, right.
Yes.
It's so confusing.
So because he's 35+, it's like guaranteed?
Yes. Any contract signed, 35+ contract that is signed, basically when the contract kicks in, the player's 35 or older, if they retire, the cap hit remains for on the team's books until that contract is up. So if they sign like a $2 million deal for 1 year, but retire halfway through, it would still count towards it. And then same thing with this one. He signed a 2-year deal that started this past season, goes in through till next season. And if he decides to retire halfway through, which I don't think he will, unless I think the big will. If anything happens with him, he'll have a training accident and he'll go on LTIR.
And I think even 32 Thoughts had been hinting towards that. If it is something with Mike Smith, it likely will be LTIR.
Because he's owed 2.5 on it, even though his cap hit's 2.2.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the Oilers story, but to me, that's kind of where I was at with Puljujarvi. I don't see him I don't see him a fit for the Flames. I don't see where he's going to play ultimately, and I don't know. I don't think that's, to me. He's not a target for me, and it's not that I don't like Jesse Puljujarvi. I just don't see that making as much sense for me. Considering what the Oilers would want for him, I don't think that that's something the Flames should look at. And I've been wrong before, but it's not a trade target for me. And I know I don't have any
skin in that game, but I agree with you, Kev. Like, I don't see the appeal for the Flames picking up Puljujarvi. Like, yes, he has promise, but is he worth the gamble?
And I would say that even for Vancouver as well, right? I just don't. I put the poll on if there was an interest in Vancouver, and they said for a low pick. But
the Oilers wouldn't give him up on a low pick. So at that point, it's kind of moot.
Yeah. And even if you're doing
if it's more of a hockey trade and you say they want a Jason Dickinson or whatever, won't happen, right? That just won't happen. I think there's a spot for him in Vancouver for sure. They'll give him every chance to play top 9 minutes. He's a right side guy. Like, depending on what happens with Besser too, might even give him every chance in the world to be a top 6 guy. But it's how do you acquire him without what would feel like an overpay, which I don't think happens.
Especially because Rutherford is trying to make our contracts for the Canucks more efficient and trying to de-Benning this team. Whereas unless it would be a Benning-esque move.
Well, I don't think it would be. I think it'd be if you can find the right price, a Puljujarvi is a smart pickup for any team. It's finding that right price.
Yeah, and understanding what the priority is with your team, though. Like, I guess when I look at the Flames, and I even look at this with the Canucks, I think the priority to me priority one with the Flames obviously is Gaudreau and Kachuk. Obviously, that's priority one. Priority two has to, in my mind, is defense. The six. I think that's the place where you need to be acquiring some pieces there. And I would say that for Vancouver as well. I think the priority of position needs to be defense. I mean, again, it depends on what you're doing with JT Miller and what you're doing with Brock Besser, but you do need to improve that blue line. So that, in that sense, giving up a lot for Jesse Puljujarvi doesn't make sense when you have some other needs to fill. And that might take some other higher draft capital or asset capital to fill.
Yep. That's kind of where I was coming from too. If the price was right, yes, but I don't see the price being right.
Yeah. But yeah, that's there as well. Well, let's get to the Canucks. There's been a little bit of news on them. I guess first we'll talk about the free agent signings. I don't think we've had a chance to speak of both of them. Niels Amon and Philippe Johansson that was signed today. Johansson was a draft pick of the Minnesota Wild. They decided not to sign him. So the Wild will get a compensatory pick for the fact that the Canucks signed him. And Niels Amon was also a draft pick of the Colorado Avalanche. And they decided to not sign. And the Vancouver Canucks took a chance on him. And I liked what Cam Robinson had to say. Shout out to Cam. It's a dart. And it doesn't hurt to have darts to throw at the dart board. It sounds like Johansson's going to play in Europe this year. I'm not sure what the situation is with Amon, but I just think getting these type of players to just build the depth, which has been young depth is sorely lacking in the Vancouver Canucks organization. And I think adding to it has helped. Good depth pieces into your organization.
If Johansson's going to play in Europe this year, it's then that for me it's a dart. But if he's not coming over to play,
you'd want him in Abbey, if anything, Sean.
I'd want him in Abbey, yeah. But yes, he will continue to develop his game with Sweden and for London next season. But until he comes over, I'm not going to have any expectations at all.
Yeah, I know you message in the chat that it's going to be an Abbey pickup, and I was almost said unless you think Abbotsford is in Europe, and we've had that debate before.
Full disclosure, I didn't have a chance to read the article.
No, I know. I was just making the joke because we had the joke of where Abbotsford actually is in the BC Peninsula. And then we could just add Europe as part of our debate. Oh, is it in Europe, Abbotsford?
Yeah, it's past hope. It's in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah. You take the cruise and just the cruise. You go to the Canada Place. You take the boat and you just head right to Abbotsford. It's fun. I think that the organization is trying to build depth all over the place. So to me, I don't look at these as major signings that are going to, these are not as I'm expecting to play maybe even at all with the Canucks, but it's good to have competition and depth. That is something that I think both have lacked in a long time. And I think Rutherford and Alvin and Caston Gay and Granado and Clancy and Crew want to add some competition.
Well, again, Amon's a good competition, but if Johansson's not coming over till not this season but next, then The
What
competition
competition is he really bringing?
Yeah.
When he gets here in a year.
If he gets here.
If he gets here, fair enough.
Because I'm pretty sure I remember the Flames doing this with a couple defensemen. And no, was it Johan Lerby? He barely played, and they did it with Johannes Kindval as well. And he's played 19 games. He played 19 games with the Heat this past season. So it's a dart. You may be blindfolded and spun around to try and hit the dartboard, but it's still a dart.
Yep. Yeah. The other thing that came out here is, I don't know how to so Nick Kypreos was on the Bob McCallum podcast this week, and this, sometimes all you need to do to stir up Canucks Twitter is say Canucks, and then Canucks Twitter is stirred. But the word country club atmosphere came up from Nick Kypreos around the Vancouver Canucks. Kypreos is suggesting that there's going to be big changes, and a bunch of people are going to go. I want to be careful. The reason I want to approach this is I want to be careful with using that as fact-based. I'm not trying to discredit Nick Kypreos, but I want to be careful about fact-based and content creation, because I think there's a
country club was content creation.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. I think that but it led to a whole conversation around the idea of another rebuild in Vancouver. And a lot of people talked about that. And I thought maybe this is a good conversation for us to have of what constitutes a rebuild here. We the joke in Edmonton has been, how many rebuilds have been through. I mean, Andrew Cogliano was a former Oiler part of Rebuild 1, Rebuild 2. You had Taylor Hall. You had Neil Yakupov. You've had other situations where they've rebuilt and then rebuilt. I mean, Arizona has been rebuilding since 1997, since they've been in the NHL.
Yeah, I was about to say since they've been in the league. Yeah.
Yeah. Buffalo has been in a constant sense of rebuild. So we hear that word a lot. Of course, one of the teams in the Final Four wrote a letter about the idea of rebuild or re-something. It's a fascinating word that came up again about the idea of Vancouver, tear it all down, bring it back up. Now we're seeing one organization that went from 48 points to a Stanley Cup final in the Colorado Avalanche. Another organization that has been much more consistent in their appearances at the Stanley Cup the last decade. And of course, they're winning in the Tampa Bay Lightning. But what constitutes a rebuild? Maybe that's the question. What defines a rebuild? How do we know we need a rebuild?
For me, a rebuild is when is a rebuilding of the team's core by acquiring younger players that can that they're going to be part of the core for a long time, or that's the plan. If you do not have you don't have a core and you're trying to build that up through the draft, through acquiring younger players, that's a rebuild. If you already have the core and you're trying to build around that, that's not a rebuild. And
like, to me, a perfect trade example of a rebuild, like to build off of Sean's point here, is like what the Flames did with Iginla. You saw the return for Iginla and you're like, who? I don't recognize any of those names, because they were wanting to get young draft capital, or at least promising young players, young prospects, to try and build the new core round. Obviously, none of those in that specific Iginla trade really worked out for the Flames, but I was just using that as a general idea. And maybe I missed the dartboard on that example, but it was just an example.
That's exactly what it is. It's trading star players for draft capital and prospect capital, and hoping that in 3, 4, 5, 6 years that you can be a contender. There's retooling where you're slightly. You're still keeping a good portion of the core together, and you're tinkering to find the right mix. But that's not a rebuild.
And I would argue that Vancouver is more closer to a retooling than a rebuild.
I would say that what this management team is looking to do is a retool, because I think they're going to try and build around the core, whether it's just the three, whether it's PD, Hughes, and Demko, or you include Horvat in that, because I've seen him be listed amongst that in with those three as well. You can build around that. Once you have that core too, and you have to take a jumping off point with the core at some point here when you're doing any sort of rebuild. Once you have that core, you have to take that next step, and this is where a lot of teams struggle. You saw Ottawa struggle with it this year, because I think they feel that they felt that they had a core that they could do that with. Canucks have struggled to do that since having the bubble. But it's you have to, yeah. But now there's contracts on this team and players on this team that will, and there will be big names that will not be part of this team going into next season. But that's going to be for me, it's called, that would be constitute a retool. And I do not think that this team needs to be teared down to the studs to change this. I think there's a lot. The difference between people make out the difference between Tampa and Colorado and say Vancouver as immense. While it is big, I don't think it's as big as many make it out to be. And a lot of things can go if you make the right choices, a couple shrewd moves, it expedites things up quickly. And there's no need to just completely tear it down. Like, if you're going to tear down the Canucks, like, you might as well trade Petey, because he's got his contract's up in a couple of years. He's not going to want to stick around for that. And then what are you going to do with Hughes and Demko? Like, at that point, it's. And then you look at any team that's done that. The scorched earth whole thing, it doesn't work out. It takes decades, not just years. It takes at least a decade to recover from that.
Well, some will use Colorado as an example, because they had 48 points a few years ago, but they made some significant trades as well that they were able to. The Matt Duchene trade got them Samuel Girard. That helped. I mean, he's not going to be in this series, but that's a guy. You look at also everyone talks about the Devon Toews trade. That worked out really well for 2 draft picks. You look at the Nazem Kadri trade that ended up working at, new Kerfoot for Kadri. That trade that worked out for them. They got the Darcy Kemper deal done. And they drafted high: McKinnon, Makar, Bow, and Byram. I mean, they also got Eric Johnson. They got Arturi. They made some pretty shrewd trades that got them to the position where they are. And not every general manager can pull that off right away. And it takes
clap for Joe Sakic.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think for me, what it comes down to is I want to re-philosophy. And I think we're starting to see a new philosophy on how the Canucks need to be built. And I don't think it necessarily, like someone pointed out, it was Joshua Griffith, a friend of ours, that's pointed out he didn't think it was unpopular opinion the Canucks need a big rebuild. And I think that there's a lot of Canucks fans that would be open to the idea of a rebuild if it was done right, because I think that the perception is that Benny didn't do it right, and if it was done right, I think it would be okay. But I also think that it's what we're seeing here. I think the word I would use is re-philosophy, and I think we're starting to see it. We're starting to see the Canucks bring in players that fit the type of game that they want to play. They're like, I feel like Jim Benning just shot from the hip. I mean, yeah, the Connor Garland OEL trade, you look at that trade. I mean, it's a controversial trade. You gave up a first round pick, a 9th overall pick for it. It just, I'm not saying it's a good or bad trade. It's just, it does sting a little bit. Some of these other decisions, I mean, all the free agents that they signed and overpaid with the veterans, just a lot of the philosophy of what Jim Benning was trying to do didn't work. And I think we're seeing a re-philosophy of trying to change the way that they play, trying to change the way that they practice, trying to change the way that they develop. And I don't necessarily think that means that you have to necessarily tear it down, but it might require some significant changes to get different players in. So you keep I think you keep going on the same trajectory that you're going on. It's just a re-philosophy. You just work towards your philosophy. And I think that seems to work a little bit more than to tear down, rebuild all the way up. I mean, I haven't done any historical accuracy of what that is, but you look at, I mean, maybe did the Rangers tear it down? Not really. They didn't. They got Alexis Lafreniere because they got lucky in the COVID lottery, and that COVID lottery where they threw everybody that was sort of in the playoffs, in that playoff bubble, into the draft lottery. They got in that. They got Alexis Lafreniere. So, I don't know. I don't think that they need to tear it completely down, but they just need to, and I think we're seeing it. I think we're seeing a new philosophy, and they just need to go on that philosophy and build it there.
And I'm perfectly okay with that if that's how they describe it, because I'm sick of all these words to try and describe how to improve a team.
I mean, what did the Oilers
overused? Whether it's rebuild, retool, restock, I don't care what version of the word you use. Let's aim to not use the pretext of to that.
Yeah, I am not one that is a big believer that you have to it's not a bad idea to accumulate draft picks. Don't get me wrong. But you need to know what the hell you're doing with these draft picks. And it's great that the Arizona Coyotes, Montreal Canadiens, and Seattle Kraken have draft picks. But what are they going to do with them? Like, how do you build with them? It's that's the part that I think is important. And, for the Canucks, the Canucks have something that a lot of teams have. And that is a franchise goaltender. And that, to me, builds your process up. Look at what Igor Shesterkin did with the Rangers, right? Like, I don't know, are the Rangers in the Final Four without Igor Shesterkin? I don't think so.
Nope.
And I actually kind of like the comparison to the Rangers in the sense that, like, yes, the examples that I'm going to bring up might not be on the exact same level as the Rangers, but I see enough similarities that you can use them as a comparable. So Shesterkin and Demko, both franchise goaltenders. Fox, Hughes, both franchise defensemen. Whether you want to use Zibanejad or someone younger like Lafreniere or, but they both have like top tier offensive talent in like we have with PD and Besser. So like I see enough similarities there that like there's enough promise in the core that you don't need to completely overhaul the team. It's more tweaks that are needed because we have the potential of like what we did in the bubble. We have the potential of getting on a run and with the right, coach behind us and that sort of thing to be able to make it into the playoffs. It's just a matter of whether it's consistent long-term success.
Well, it is also going to depend on what the Canucks decide to do with JT Miller, right? because if you're not going to sign him, you probably are going to want prospects or younger players for him, right? So that's going to be a key of where you go. I don't think we've talked enough about what happens with Brock Besser, but that's another decision that has to be made. And I wonder if that's on both sides. I mean, I don't know where Brock Besser's at, but he's had a very difficult year. And I think he's thinking about things. I'm not saying he wants to leave Vancouver, but he's got a lot on his mind. I would suspect, to be quite honest, that I think he would prefer to be in Vancouver than anywhere else. I think he would prefer the comfort of stability, but that's still a decision that has to be made. You've got other decisions to be made as well. So it's all going to depend, but I think the Rangers are a good example. One team that nobody talks about when we talk about draft picks that I think is a cautionary tale is the Vegas Golden Knights, because they had draft picks. They went into that expansion year with a ton of draft picks. And what did they get for it? Cody Glass is elsewhere. Nick Suzuki is elsewhere. Bunch of players are elsewhere. Eric Brandstrom's elsewhere.
The pick they got back in Nolan Patrick is kind of a question mark. Like, he's not, necessarily a for sure for them. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to see the difference in strategy, because I would say Seattle in their first year was almost the anti-Vegas as far as what they tried to do. But who knows? Maybe Seattle a couple years from now is going to be in a more sustainable success window, as opposed to Vegas being more of a got lucky, was hot for 3-4 years, and might be questionable long term.
Well, yeah, they ended up with 3 first-round picks, 2 seconds. Glass, Suzuki, Brandstrom, Haig, and Decision. The Decision hasn't made the jump. Haig's a mainstay on their blue line. Brandstrom was traded for was part of the Mark Stone trade. Suzuki was part of the Pacioretty trade. And then, they got Nolan Patrick in the Cody Glass trade. So it's not just the other thing with these picks is that they do add ammo for trades later on. But again, you need to have that idea of what the plan is. You can't just go all willy-nilly, which kind of sort of screwed Vegas up in terms of they went all in real quick, and now it's gonna be interesting to see what they do this offseason to try and open up cap space for them to do stuff.
And to answer Dylan's most recent comment here, we're not saying that the picks did nothing. It's more of the fact that they have no control over those picks anymore. They're elsewhere.
Well, it's about building a team, right? So they've done it and they've built a team, but it's, as you said there, Chris, are we going to start seeing this as be the decline of Vegas? And where would this team be without, if they had Nick Suzuki instead of Pacioretty? Or, well, honestly, that's really the only one that you're questioning a little bit. But when you had Mark Stone and Pacioretty with Chandler Stevenson, that was a really good line especially when the misfit line was going as well.
I think with Vegas, to me, is that they probably could have developed a really solid, young, consistent team for years to come. And I'm not sure we're seeing that with Vegas now. They got old.
What happened is they were like, okay, we're good enough. We had that first year run, got the taste, and wanted more. So they continued to add Pietrangelo, trade for Pacioretty, trade for Mark Stone, They just kept adding older, more expensive players because they wanted to win as soon as possible, as opposed to creating a more longer term approach where you could have built up a good young group.
I think a good example of that is like what Kevin was saying earlier with the Rangers ownership, like that they just want to make a big splash. Well, I think that's kind of what exactly what Foley did after he made the Cup final with Vegas in the first year of owning them. He just saw a dollar sign and is like, okay, let's get big name players, let's fill this market, and let's try and be good now because clearly we had something going there.
And in fact, no one went to make that. I think you can make the argument that maybe they went and they took one too many. Vegas tried to make one too many big moves, but I think I liked the idea of going in and trying to. They got gifted a very solid and deep team, and they wanted to add top end talent, and they used what they had at their disposal, which was picks and prospects, to do that. Nothing wrong with that in my mind. It's just they decided that they were in a different situation. They went from acquiring all those picks in that first draft to going, okay, now we can use these to improve the team. And they've been to a Cup final. They've been to a couple conference finals. It's not like it's been a waste.
Nope.
They just never finished the job, but only one team ever does every year.
Yeah, Dylan, to answer Dylan's question here, I'm so confused with Kev. Are you saying the picks are less value than Procedure, or that Vegas could have done better if they kept their picks? I would say a bit of column A and a bit of column B. I still think that you look at Nick Suzuki. I think that was one. That one didn't work out. I think in terms of a poor. I mean, the other draft picks, they haven't even elsewhere have they truly landed. I mean, I wonder. Peyton Krebs is going to be an interesting question, I think, in Buffalo, because I think that's a guy that's going to turn out in Buffalo. That might be a loss, but you're also getting Jack Eichel, who I think is going to have is on the track to being back to Jack Eichel that we know and love. So I don't know if that's that, but I think it's a bit of column A and a bit of column B, where they didn't waste them, but they didn't all work out as well as they think.
Well, no, that's the other thing, and is that a lot of draft picks and all the draft pick capital doesn't necessarily work out.
Yep.
And it's trying to find that right balance of making sure that you have enough draft picks that you can make some hedge your bets on with prospects, but you also can use them to improve your on ice team now. And that's been the problem with the Benning era, is that they weren't able to create enough draft capital to do that, and they still made those trades.
Yeah.
The issue with where the Canucks are at now is they've got the core, but they don't have the supporting cast to help them take that next step, at least at a consistent level.
And the supporting cast they do have are on inefficient contracts that aren't working out as well as they'd hoped.
Yes, they're expensive. Their supporting cast is expensive, and it hurts their opportunities to try and get assets to help improve it. So that's part of what's going on. And I think another part of that, a bit of that conversation about where Kiprio set the Canucks Twitter on fire with the country club comment, was that he wouldn't be surprised about anything. And I think one thing about it is, and John Shannon talked about this later on, actually today on the Sakaris and Price show, that they're going to stick to their guns, and they're going to figure out how they want to go and build this team, and they're going to build it that way, regardless of what the fans say, what the media says, what Aquilini has to say. They're good. They've got a plan, and they're going to stick to it. And I don't think it's as slam dunk simple as many are making it out to be. I think there will be some trades for futures, but there will also be hockey trades, and there will also be trades where they use assets to pick up a player. It's going to be, as I said, going back to what is a rebuild. For me, a rebuild is getting as many assets as possible to figure out who your new core is. Well, we know who the core is here, and they're trying to build around it. That's more of a retool in my mind.
That, because I just am not a fan of Kyprios, and he was part of that 94 Rangers team. Anything that he says, I'm not a fan of. I've never been a fan of him when he was an analyst on TV, and I'm still not a fan of him now. So I just pay him no attention.
Well, and again, that's where it's not Kyprios per se, but it's wording. It's the wording that got people's attention, the country club atmosphere, and I feel that I'll say this, Canucks fans, I do not think that you truly appreciate Bo Horvat for what he has been. I don't, I'm not saying is he the best captain in the league? I'm not saying that, but look what he's been through. He went through an entire, everybody, but there was a specific disaster that he had to deal with back in the 56 game season. You had the last couple of years, you had, of course, all this COVID situation. You had the coaching change, you had the management change, you had the most horrendous start that you could ever imagine with a historic low penalty kill. You've had so much on your plate, and probably, let's not forget you probably in some way trying to support a guy like Brock Besser and his personal issues with his father as much as you possibly can as a leader of the team. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen on any other team, but I think that that's important to recognize here. I don't think it's a country. I hate the word country club atmosphere because I feel that that's such a unfair criticism to Bo Horvat. I think there's been a lot of other things that are impact at play here that, I think Bo Horvat has done more than you realize for the Canucks. And the last few years under Green, look up his line mates. They were not the who's who of the NHL. He was playing with some very interesting people. Let's put it that way. He's done a lot for this Canucks community, and people are. And if you're trading if you want to trade Bo Horvat, if you feel that that's your direction, good luck to you finding another one. I think feel like Peter Labardius. Bo Horvat is just like Michael Backlund. He's just one of those guys that just goes out. I think you can, when Bo Horvat is effective and on his game, the Canucks are tougher to beat. Same with Michael Backlund. And that they are hard players. There are harder players to find than you think.
And he's had those moments, especially like the bubble playoffs, where he threw the team on his back and was Mr. Clutch. He might not be as consistent as some people might hope, and he's not at like a elite echelon like some players in the league are. But what he brings with his overall game is worth not only as captain, but worthwhile keeping. And like you said, Kev, I think he's definitely underappreciated in this market. He's done all that while this team has been in complete turmoil over the past 5-6 years. He was the only player on the roster last time Brad Richardson was a Canuck.
I do think that Alvin and Rutherford, who came from watching one of the best players to ever play the game in Sidney Crosby, and probably one of the hardest workers too, to seeing where this team's at here. I do think they want to see this team take another step in terms of work ethic and professionalism and maturity in that aspect. But every team goes through that. Look at Tampa, look at Colorado. And what's the talk about with Colorado? They're led by Nathan McKinnon, who is a just militant health nut. Guy hasn't had complex carbs in 10 years.
How does he do those Tim Horton commercials? Do they offer him like? I don't think he's eating the Beebs bits. Is he eating the Beebs bits there?
He has. No, you won't even have Beebs latte either. Like it's black coffee for him, and that's it. And better get the dark roast because the rest it's just. Yeah. But but that's what you need is you need someone who you can rally around, and I think Bo has that ability, and I think he to meet the expectations of the previous regime, it worked. But what he's realizing and this management team is realizing is it's time to take another step. That's all it is.
Yeah, I agree.
It's understanding. There's a reason Tampa is in the third Stanley Cup Finals in a row. Is because they said enough is enough. And were able to work their asses off and take that next step, and they having all that talent really helps, and making some shrewd moves helps management wise, but it's also all on like the core of that team, the Hedman, the McDonoughs, the Points, the Kucherovs, the Stamkoses, the Palots, the Kalorans. They all bought in. And that's what you need. So, and throw in another thing that happened with Bo too is that that locker room got irreparably changed, and it takes time to figure it all out again. After they lost Markstrom, after they lost Tanev in one off season, let alone the I know Stetcher was well liked in the room as well. Like then Edler the year after.
Yeah.
The Canucks are changing, or have been trying to change the core of this team for way too long, and I think they've got the core that you can build around there. Now you just need to find the right supporting cast and maybe build into the core a bit more. If they had one or two more pieces that were you could very much say are core pieces, and maybe that is a Podkolzin, maybe that is a Rathbone, or maybe they can pick up someone else. That'll go a long way to help quelling the concerns in Canucks Nation. But right now, I think if you're screaming for a tear it down rebuild, I'm not sure you understand what that actually means.
I think those people just want to see anarchy and watch it burn. They aren't saying that they want a rebuild because they think that the team is complete garbage and doesn't deserve a chance. They just essentially like to see the Canucks and their fan base in turmoil. At least that's my take.
I don't know if that's completely it. I think that people have I think that there's please don't get me wrong, there's an important play of analytics, and I think it's really important. And I'm getting to where I'm going here. But analytics doesn't equate human or other elements that happen. It is a purely it's analytical, it's hypothetical. It is a purely black and white, no emotion situation, which can be either good or bad. I mean, good because it's, I guess if you want it to be fact-based, but it's bad when you don't take the human element into it. And you look at Colorado and you're like, okay, look at what they've done. If we do this the way that Colorado did this, we'll be where Colorado is in about 4 years. So let's model ourselves after this. But, people have been trying to copy. It's a copycat league. People have been trying to copy all the time. It doesn't always work because there's other factors are in play and there's 32 teams and it just doesn't always work. There's other things that happen. A draft pick doesn't work out. Trade doesn't work out. A player doesn't work out. Right. So, I think people are trying to exact science something that's not always an exact science.
And that's what it is. Yeah. If you could argue that some of the tweaks that Benning made worked out, where would this team be? Like, sure. Say the Berchi trade. Berchi worked out and was a legit top 6 forward still. Where does that go?
Michael Ferland got a concussion.
Yeah, all it takes is one wrong decision to derail, or one decision that goes bad to derail what a lot of these plans are.
I can't recall if it was the last season of Gillis or if it was the first season or two of Benning, but what if little things Louis worked out?
Well, yeah, that was a Benning signing.
That was Benning. Yeah,
that was like his first big signing.
Yeah, his first big splash. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What if the Canucks? What if Cody Hodgson worked out? His back didn't get, like, they didn't mess up that, because it's not just about that. What if they didn't mess up the diagnosis of Cody Hodgson's back, which they kind of did? Do they make that trade for Cassian? Is he a key member of that team going forwards? So I know I look at that and everything has to go right. One of the big things that's helping Colorado is that the start of McKinnon's career wasn't great, and he was one of the few that in that era where they all signed long-term for sweetheart deals. Like, Nathan McKinnon's is a $6.5 million cap hit. That's just unfair.
That's about $5 million under market value.
Like, I could see Quinn Hughes' contract potentially maybe being that for the Canucks, but you don't know.
I would argue that, at least for the Canucks right now, Demko is probably the closest to that sweetheart contract. We are going to be loving that contract by the time it's done.
Well, I think both Hughes at 7.85, I think could come out looking really good. But yeah, 5 for Demko is really, really nice too.
The Hughes deal is a good deal. I would argue that the Demko deal was a steal.
So yeah, you just have to define what a rebuild is and understand what that entails and what what's the goal. Because I got into the debate on Twitter about it, and then one person made a good point, is that the foundation of the team was ruined under Benning. I'm like, what do you mean by the foundation? If you're talking about just the players, I think the core is there that you can build around. But if you're talking about decision-making processes and player development and drafting and that foundation, 100% agree. But you can rebuild the management and the off-ice side while not necessarily doing that on the on-ice side.
And we could be having a whole different conversation here if the Edmonton Oilers were in the Stanley Cup final, because that's a whole other philosophy of how you built a Stanley Cup team. You drafted Connor McDavid and said, "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou, O Spirit. Make him get 150 goals because we have no chance of winning other than that." Amen. Oh, and blessed Leon Draisaitl, another offensive player. Right? But no, I mean, really.
Yeah,
But
you're not wrong.
You're not wrong. But they still had 2 top-end players, right? And they've got that. They're building around that core.
Yes.
Colorado's been at this for years, and they went through I would say they've went through. This would be they had Duchesne there. That didn't materialize, and then they got McKinnon. So sometimes you do have to move on from certain players of that of your initial rebuild, but you're not trying to reinvent what your team is.
And Landeskog's been there that entire time.
Yep. And I kid with the Oilers. I mean, but they got Ryan Hughes-Hawkins. They got other good players there, but Connor and Leon Draisaitl were just at a different level. The one other thing, and maybe this will interest Dylan, but John Gibson's name came up today as a potential trade possibility. There were conflicting reports. There was one report that suggested that John Gibson and Anaheim have basically kind of essentially agreed that Gibson would move on. But there was another report suggesting that that's not the case. So I guess we're going to have to wait and see on the idea of John Gibson. I guess if he's traded, then we know that happened. But if not, I guess that's not. But we brought that idea up before of trading John Gibson. I think there will be a lot of suitors for him. I mean, I look at. Obviously, we talked about Edmonton needing a goaltender. We talked about. I think Pittsburgh could argue need a goaltender. Washington could use a goaltender. You got your Devon's Leafs that need a goaltender. There's another bunch of options that do need a goaltender. So I think there would be a healthy interest in John Gibson. It comes down to price and fit and what you're giving up for a 28-year-old goaltender.
I wonder if a lot of this is just them having the conversation and saying, yeah, we're probably going to be not pushing our chips in for another couple of years here. What do you want to do? If we can get the right deal for you, is that an option? And he sounds like he said go for if you can find the right deal for because what has he got? Sure, he's got a decent no trade. So the way I look at it, I think this is just more, and we're starting to see more and more teams do this. Just seeing what's out there.
Just like what Rutherford's doing with JT or did with JT Miller, he's answering the phone. He's not making calls, but he's answering the phone.
Just like Chicago's doing with essentially their whole roster.
Yeah.
Including DeBrincat. Well, so there's Jones, Taves, and Kane are the only ones that they're not willing to listen on. Because of the no movement clauses, everyone else is fair game. It may take a lot to get a couple of those players, but
like a
DeBrincat or a Kirby Doc. But they're willing to listen, and I wonder if this is more along those lines. And they're willing to listen, but they also wanted to make sure that everyone knows that for the right deal, he would waive.
With the UFA market the way it is, the RFA market the way it is, and the salary cap the way it is, I think we're going to see some actual hockey trades being made. So I just think it's going to be tough for teams to try to fit all of everything in. I mean, we talked about Johnny Gaudreau and the Rangers. We had that debate earlier, but that's a salary cap issue that I could see. I mean, it's I think that there's a lot of dominoes that I think people are trying to prepare, and they have a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, and one of them is just looking at hockey trades.
Yeah, I think there's more of an appetite for it now. I think just because of we're in another year of a flat cap, and it almost forces more movement in trades, because you can't just buy people out with your excess, or
it takes more creativity.
Yeah.
And I also think we saw Chris Peters put out his final draft ranking, and he put Logan Cooley ahead of Shane Wright. Now, I'm not saying that I still think Montreal, if I was to mock draft this, I still think Montreal goes with Shane Wright. But I think the point that I'm going to try to make here is I think that this draft, I think that there's probably a number of different teams with a very, very different list that you could see that there's a legitimate argument for a New Jersey to move down and get the player that they want, as an example. It's not like if you're New Jersey and you think of moving down, it's not silly. I mean,
kind of in the same vein as like what Detroit did with going off the board with Seider. Like, no one saw it coming, but that's who they were valuing and who they wanted to pick.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah, there's a few people. There's like, just depends on the board where you have people. Like
Columbus with PLD.
Yep, exactly. So I just think I do think we're going to see a lot of move. I think we could see a lot of movement when the finals are over, and then we got the coaching carousel as well. We still are waiting to hear Pete DeBoer's name officially in Dallas. We're waiting to hear what the heck's going on with Barry Trotz. It sounds like that may not be Winnipeg. It sounds like Winnipeg is going in a different direction. So there's lots of decisions to be made.
Both goalies and coaches this season are going to be really interesting to see who lands where.
Yeah. Torts in Philadelphia media. Make it happen.
Oh, man, we thought, though, please give
and you'll get to see Brooksy again.
I guess that's what I'm saying, Brooksy.
Torts and Gritty.
Oh, that's a match. Oh God, that would be brilliant.
just give me videos of Gritty stalking Torts around the arena and him yelling. I'll be happy.
One of them has to have the other in a headlock at some point.
Yeah. And then we didn't even talk about the possibility of David Pastrnak being traded.
Yeah, that's another big one. 26 years old. Oh, man. Like, everyone always focuses on when they do the redrafts and coulda, woulda, shoulda ones with drafting. Everyone always looks at the top end of that first round for the Canucks, with them taking Virtanen over Ehlers or Nylander. They could have had Pastrnak. He was picked the pick right after them picking Jared McCann.
Damn.
That's right. Yep.
But yeah, what Boston does this offseason is going to be just like Bruce Cassidy. Did we even have a chance to talk about that, or was that like that was right?
We talked about that last Monday.
Yeah. It's what Boston does this offseason is going to be a must watch, because either they're going to blow it all up and go very young, or they're going to try and find a way to one last dance this, and I could see them bringing back Krejci and Bergeron for one more year.
I mean, that would be a Herculean effort to actually make that happen, and I'm doubtful, but I would be impressed if they somehow pulled it off.
Because they've got because they've got Marchand and McAvoy out for at least a couple months to start the season.
Mm-hmm.
So and when you're already know that those are significant injuries, those players are not going to be 100% until the start of next season.
Also, another question mark I have in Boston: who's your number one next season? Is it Swayman, or are you staying with Ullmark?
That's a good that's the one thing that I think they do have a nice thing on is that tandem.
Yeah, and they gave, well, maybe not gave away, but like they were able to walk away from Vladar and still essentially be in a decent goalie situation. So yeah, they definitely kind of lucked out in that regard.
Well, I know they've had high hopes for Swayman for years, and he's only 23. But Allmark's been solid. He's got 3 years left at $5 million though, so that's the only issue there. If it was 1 year shorter, I think I'd feel a little bit better about that situation, especially because Swayman needs a new deal next year.
Yeah, I honestly, I kind of feel like Ullmark is going to be the next Mikko Koskinen as far as a deal going sour.
But yeah, lots to look forward to going, especially once the silly season starts with trades leading up to the draft.
Yep, it'll be fun. It'll be fun.
And we'll be there to cover it. Exactly.
Well said, Chris. Let's leave it there. We're back next week. We're trying to figure out a day that works that gets everybody together. It's kind of like herding cats at this point, but we're working through it. I saw a Facebook post, cats are like staff and dogs are, what are dogs were like? Cats are staff and dogs, I can't remember what dogs were, but it was something more loyal.
The dogs are like dogs?
Dogs are like dogs, yes. Yes. Cats are like cats, dogs are like dogs. Anyway, leave it there. How do we follow everyone?
I am BeardyConnect03 on Twitter.
I'm at Schneid's on most social media.
Devin Gordhouse09, Tyler TNOBLE, I am KEVULE, Shifts and Bucks, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, wherever you get your audio, as well as on the Area 51 Sports Network. Do check out the Shifts and Bucks news packs. We'll have our pod clips all week. So we'll be doing all that. And so keep an eye out for us, and we'll have some polls and we'll have some fun. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.